All right. This question we get all the time. It's a really big reality in this process. How can I help address my parents' concerns about fundraising? Maybe you're not the one with concerns, but maybe your parents. You bring this up to them and they have extreme concerns about fundraising. How can we help people address their parents' concerns?
I know for me, when I told my parents that I was considering going 2 years with GoCorps right after graduation, me raising support was their biggest concern. And so I approached that with a lot of prayer, which feels like the Jesus answer, right? But every appointment that I set up, every letter that I mailed out, every phone call that I made, I just let my parents know, like, hey, I'm making these phone calls today, I'm meeting with these people today, will you pray with me? And just invited them into the whole process. Because they were skeptical that God would provide. They personally had never known anyone that had raised support. And so God just showed me that they too need to just be brought along so that they can understand. And to this day, my dad would tell you, me going through that process has increased his own faith, and that he will never question God again in regards to finances, because he was just utterly blown away at how God provided for me to go serve in Thailand for 2 years.
Ryan, that's so good. I would just add and extend to that and say, when you're in your undergrad, before you go, bring them into the conversations that you're having with the Lord early and often. I would say many times when a parent does not support their child going overseas or doing fundraising or whatever, it's because that's the first time that parent is thinking about it when you bring it up to them. And of course they're gonna be like, wait, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Like, you've hidden this part of you that you're discovering and you're talking about with your friends or people in your church, but you're not talking about it with your parents. And so how else would you expect them to respond? And so even when you discover who GoCorps is, and when you begin to look at the teams and you have a conversation with a friend or a church leader, tell your parents about it. They may be uncomfortable with it at that point, but bring them with you on that journey and just ask the Lord to grow their faith. You don't want it to be a surprise to them when you've already made the decision. But bring them on that journey with you. And they still may push back here or there, but honor the Lord with your parents, and then give them the opportunity, or rather give God the opportunity to work in them and through them.
I think that's something I've seen in some of my goers' lives that I've walked with parents that for various reasons are just unsupportive, or it feels like there's friction in the relationship when this idea of serving and then having support is brought up. And I think something that I have found really encouraging just to observe in my last few years as a coach is, as you walk in obedience where the Lord is calling you, He is moving in your parents' lives. And so I've seen so many goers who continue to walk in obedience where the Lord calls them, sometimes without approval or like encouragement at different levels from their parents. But then as they've walked in obedience and really walked with the Lord in this process to hear Him and to follow in step with where He's leading, I've seen parents' hearts shift, kind of like you were saying. Like, as you walk in obedience, I think the Lord is really sweet to then bring your parents into that. And there's so many stories of goers. I think about one girl where like her parents were so unsupportive, and by the end of it, they were like the most supportive people, giving her what she needed, loving on her, setting up different dinners for her, and just she saw this transformation in their own lives. And I think what a missed opportunity that could have been for her parents' lives if she wouldn't have walked in obedience. So I think it's really cool to think about the relationship of child to parent, and how as a child, your obedience can directly impact your parents and maybe their walk and maybe their obedience to the Lord too. So I've just found that really encouraging. Like, as goers have walked in obedience, whether they've ended up going or not, just the fact that they've entertained this idea and it's been an option on the table, like to see the Lord work then in their parents' lives has been so cool. And just such a reminder that like our obedience to the Lord is seen. Our obedience to the Lord is recognized by those around us. So like how awesome to know that just as you're trying to be in tune with the Lord, that people are watching that, including your parents.
I think also as it relates to having conversations with your parents, it's really helpful to be open to hearing their concerns and to honor their concerns. So give them the honor of asking deeper questions. So can you tell me more about your concern? Maybe their concern is they're afraid that you're not going to have what you need. So then you can share with them about, well, the way that the GoCorps process works is it covers all of my needs while I'm overseas, my student loans, my health insurance, everything. I have everything that I need. Maybe their concern is with the safety. Well, then you get to invite them into what the Lord is teaching you. Maybe their concern is like they feel that it's begging. And you get to invite them into how you have been shifting your own perspective and viewpoint in that. So honor their concerns and also recognize that many of your parents, they feel their main job in life is to keep you safe and secure. So it's okay for them to bristle at this idea at first and give them the honor to say, like, I hear your concerns. I've asked these same questions and here's where I've landed on these answers. Invite them into the questions you're asking to your GoCorps coach and the things we're sharing with you that you can share with them. We actually have a page on the GoCorps website for parents. There's a video, there's a lot of frequently asked questions specifically for parents. So you can invite them there and you guys can have a conversation together by using that web page to kind of help you come to some of these conversations. And know that it might be multiple conversations. So it's okay if the first, second, even third are really difficult, hard conversations. But be able to honor them by saying, I'm hearing your concern, I'm listening to those concerns, I will pray about those concerns. Thank you for helping me think of these things. And then continue the conversation. And then I think that will just help, it might help as you're engaging with your parents.
I was gonna say, I actually had an older, I would say more wiser mom friend talk about this because I'm a new mom and I'm like, yeah, if he wants to go, let's go. Like, where do you want to go, buddy? And often that question that I've wrestled with my goers, I'm like, come on, parents, like, get on board. And I just have very little experience as a parent, and so I'm learning and growing in that. But something that I heard this older mom friend say, she actually has college age kids that are deciding if they're going to go overseas or not. And so she's like in the thick of it. And to hear her perspective shifted my perspective as a mom, but also as a coach. And she said something similar to what you were saying is we like raise our kids to be obedient to the Lord. We raise them to go, kind of like an arrow. Like they're being pulled back, they're being pulled out to be launched into the world wherever the Lord calls them. But the idea of that and then actually putting that tangibly into motion is very different as a parent. So like, as a parent, you want your kids to be launched to where the Lord calls, but then actually releasing them to go, two different ball games. And so, I don't know, that perspective and seeing that image, I see that for your parents. Like they're releasing you, they're getting ready for you to go. They're so excited, they're nervous, all the things a parent feels, but then actually letting go of the arrow is different. And so, I don't know, something about that picture gives me a lot more grace and a lot more patience in conversations to really understand where parents might be coming from as they wrestle, as they bristle, as there's friction in the conversation. So I don't know if that picture helps you, but imagine yourself as the arrow. Your parents are getting ready to release you, but in the release, there might be a struggle. There might be just some friction into letting go of that arrow. So I just appreciated this picture of this mom friend that was like, actually wrestling and going through this, and she is so wise and loves the Lord, but even herself was dealing with, the let go and the release. Like, how do I do this in a way that honors the Lord and my kids at the same time? So just something I love.
You have to remember your parents have seen you as a crying, poopy baby. And they've watched you do some of the dumbest things ever. And now you're asking them to support you to move overseas. It's going to take a minute, and that's okay. Let them wrestle. Don't be discouraged by that. Let them wrestle, and you trust the Lord. Be honest and be upfront, and pray for them, and just ask God to work. But it's okay for them to struggle. Give them that grace.
I think a good exercise for you to do personally as well in these conversations is think about what are things I can express gratitude for them? So in these conversations, how could you come to these conversations and express gratitude? Thank you for raising me with a passion for others who are hurting. Thank you for raising me with good financial sense. Thank you for loving me so much that it's going to be difficult for you to let me go. Thank you for being willing for you to make that sacrifice. Not only is it a sacrifice for you to go overseas, it's a sacrifice for your parents to also not see you for 2 years. So also think through what are ways that I can express gratitude as you're in these conversations, and that's going to open up the dialogue more as well.
I think I have struggled thinking it could be a one and done conversation. And so I'm encouraged to remember even now what you said, that it will take multiple conversations. And for my parents, one of the biggest concerns was that financial stability, because they had a particular picture in mind of what it looked like to be secure financially or to have what I would need. And so being able to let them in on some of the details of what I would have covered through the funds that would pay my salary, but also to not be discouraged when they raised a new concern, or when it seemed like they got it and then the next week or month or year they were asking the same question again. And so to just remember, that's how I can be too. We're forgetful as human beings, and so to have that grace for them and to expect that it won't just be a one and done conversation, but it will be an ongoing dialogue of how you're journeying together and how you're trusting the Lord together.
I think the final thing I would share here also is, if you do come to a place, and many goers do experience this, where they cannot reconcile, but they feel that God is asking them to say yes even without the support of their parents, that it's important to then find someone else in your life to be kind of like a spiritual parent for you. So to say okay, Lord, you never reconciled this with my parents. My parents are not on board, but I feel like you're asking me to take that step anyway. To then pray to the Lord and ask, can you put someone in my life, or can you show me who else in my life that is encouraging and supportive of this? And that those people, maybe it's through your church, maybe it's a professor, maybe it's someone you've known through some of your experience you've been a part of in college, to really ask them to be a support and an encouragement to you in that season. And that might be your story, and goers go through the process every year with that story. And it's difficult, it's hard, but we want to walk alongside you in that as well.
I was actually thinking of that for the goers that maybe have parents that aren't even believers, how big of a thing this feels when they're coming from a place of maybe no faith or lack of faith, or that conversation might feel very different, and it may lead to a place of them never quite getting your motive or quite matching, maybe your heart behind the reasons you would say yes. And I've seen with goers how finding a mentor or someone in their life that maybe isn't a parent but could step in as that role really be helpful in the conversations they're having with their parents. And then to also just have someone that is encouraging you biblically. So I don't know if you find yourself in that place too, but if you're coming from a place where maybe your parents just don't have a faith, or you feel like it's non-existent, finding a person to come alongside you that is going to keep you biblically sound and help you really be in tune with the Lord, I think could be very helpful and really strategic in your journey.